Good morning, students, once again. I hope you are doing good, well, and I believe strongly that you are also taking your lessons seriously. That's very good. Good. So we've come to another day to treat another important topic. Like we did last week, we realized that there are certain adjectives used for measurements. So today we are going to look at some of these adjectives one after the other in detail. Good. If you remember, we made mention of little, a little, few, a few. Good. So today our lesson is going to be based on using little, a little, few, a few. Good. Very good. Now, like we stated, we use little for things we cannot count, that is, uncountable nouns. So little and a little are used for things we cannot count, that is to say, a small amount of something. A small amount of something. So what then is the distinction between little and a little? Very good. When we talk of little, or when we use little to refer to something that is very minute. And so we say that little is negative. Little is negative, meaning almost none. Almost none. Good. But when we say a little, it is positive to mean a small quantity or a small amount of something. That one is positive. That is a little. And it means a small amount of something. Good. So, we can have little sugar, a little sugar. So, we will then refer to perhaps a little of sugar as little, whilst a cup of sugar will be described as a little. Because if we measure, we realize that 1 cup of sugar will be more than a little of sugar. So in that sense, you say that the little of sugar is little, while a cup full of sugar is a little. Very good. So we will then have example as Frank does little work in the house. Frank does little work in the house. Good. Then we also have Grace has a little work to do. Very good. So if we compare these two sentences on the board, Frank does little work in the house, then it tells us that almost virtually he does nothing in the house. He is idle in the house. He does virtually nothing in the house. Then if we say Grace has a little work to do, then we will say that it is something appreciable that anybody at all will be pleased with if Grace does such kind of what? A work. So Grace does a little work Grace has a little work to do. That is positive. Whilst Frank does little work in the house is negative. Well done. We now continue from the little or a little and move on to few and a few. Few, a few, as the words imply, is used to measure things we can't count. So they are used for countable nouns, countable things, things that we can count. So we can count apples, we can count mangoes, we can count eggs, we can count tables, we can count the number of computers in this room. Good. But as to whether it is something enough or not enough is another thing altogether. So when we say few, few is negative, to mean almost none. Almost none. That does not mean there is none. Almost none. So we use few. On the other hand, a few is positive, also to mean a small number of something. A small number of something. So in that sense, if somebody has one sack of mangoes and you asked for some and the person gave you 8 mangoes out of the lot, we will consider this to be few. We will consider it to be few. On the other hand, if the person gave you 20 mangoes, if we compare the two, we realize that the 20 mangoes are more than the earlier one, or let's say the 5 that was given to you. Then, in that sense, we will consider the 20 mangoes to be a few, although it is not enough. If we consider the number of mangoes in the possession of the giver, we realize that they are not enough, but then the 20 mangoes exceeds that of the 5 mangoes. So since it is 5, in consideration of the whole sack full of mangoes, virtually he gave you none. That is why we said almost none, and therefore it is negative. Good. But we'll say the 20 is a little bit enough, and for that reason we will consider that to be enough and therefore positive. So we use a few for such kind of number of items or objects or the fruits that we have. Very good. So let us have these 2 examples on the board. Daniel has few shirts and Gifty has a few dresses. Very good. With these 2 examples on the board, we realize that Daniel has few shirts, virtually almost none. So we say it is few. Possibly 3 shirts that Daniel has. On the other hand, if we look at that of Gifty, Gifty has a few dresses. And since we are saying Gifty has a few dresses, then a few is used as positive here. And therefore, we will consider the dresses to be possibly 10 dresses. So if you compare 10 dresses to 3 shirts, we realize that the 10 dresses are more than the 3 shirts that Daniel has. So these are how we use the little, a little, few, a few, and we move on. Good. So we realize that since we have negative for little and few, positive for a little and a few, then we can use certain words to describe some of these. So for example, if I say unfortunately, unfortunately, then for sure, possibly, the number of items here is something negative, and therefore few will take unfortunately, or unluckily will also take few or little. But if we say fortunately, then we know that somebody is lucky somewhere, and therefore the number of things involved is something which is enough or suffice, or is something appreciable. For example, if I say brides will receive little money at the end of this month, and brides will receive a little money at the end of this month. Good. In looking at these two sentences on the board, bride will receive little money at the end of this month, and bride will receive a little money at the end of this month. If you compare the two sentences, which of them do you think will make bride happy? I'm sure your answer says a little, because a little is positive, and for that reason the amount of money bride received at the end of the month is enough for him. And so we said bride will receive a little money at the end of this month. On the other hand, if we consider the first sentence, we realize that bride is not going to be happy. Why? In the sense that the money he received can even take it home. It is not enough, hence little. So, which of the two do you think, if we add fortunate or unfortunate to, will fit in these two sentences? I am sure you have said that fortunately will be used for a little money, whilst unfortunately will be used for little money. So we can say that unfortunately bride will receive little money at the end of this month, and we can also say fortunately bride will receive a little money at the end of this month. Very good. So on that note, we have got to know that henceforth we have to be very careful in the usage of little, a little, few, a few. And like we said, Little is negative, and it is used for something that is almost non-existent. It is negative, almost none. But a little is positive, and for that reason, that is to say, a small amount of something. On the other hand, we looked at few and a few. Few is negative, almost none, whilst a few is positive, which is a small number of something. So in all, whenever you are using this, you have to be very careful and know how to use them appropriately. Very good. So this is where we will come to the end of this lesson for today. But then, if you go to the net, as usual, go to Internet Study Mates, you'll find a detailed note of what we have discussed there and 2 exercises. One on little and a little, and the other one is on few and a few. Try your hands on and post them to me. Then I'll mark them for you. Thank you.